Standing 7 feet tall with obsidian black chitin covering her muscular frame, the Kethmori battle commander possessed forearms ending in razor-sharp talons, compound eyes that could track 17 different targets simultaneously, and natural armor plating that had deflected plasma bolts from point-blank range. She had spent 3 centuries conquering worlds, enslaving species, and expanding the hegemony's domain across the galaxy's outer rim. The creature before her, on the view screen, looked like something her younglings would keep as a pet. "This is what the Council fears?" Vexthara clicked her mandibles in amusement, her translator rendering the sound as derisive laughter. "These... humans?" The image displayed a bipedal being barely 6 feet in height, covered in soft pink flesh with only a thin layer of fabric for protection. It possessed merely 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 small eyes, positioned ridiculously close together on the front of its skull. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no obvious signs of enhanced capabilities. "According to our scouts, Commander, they've established 17 colonies along the neutral zone border," reported Subcommander Thexel, his 4 arms manipulating holographic displays with practiced efficiency. "Each world contains between 50,000 and 2 million of these creatures." "And their military capabilities?" Vexthara studied the tactical readouts, noting the humans' primitive projectile weapons and basic energy shields. Minimal. Their ships rely on crude fusion drives and kinetic weaponry. No plasma cannons, no quantum disruptors, no phase shift technology. Their ground forces carry chemically propelled metal slugs fired from handheld tubes. Thexel's tone conveyed the same dismissive attitude shared by the entire bridge crew. Vexthara activated the fleet-wide communication system, her image appearing on the bridges of her accompanying vessels. "Warriors of the hegemony, today we claim 17 new worlds for the glory of our species. Intelligence reports indicate the inhabitants are a primitive race calling themselves humans, bipedal creatures with no significant military capabilities." Thousands of Kethmori soldiers roared their approval, the sound reverberating through the fleet's corridors like thunder. The Third Hegemony Fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and countless smaller vessels carrying over 200,000 of the galaxy's most elite warriors. "We shall begin with their largest settlement, designated Haven's Rest by these creatures. Standard conquest protocols apply. Eliminate military resistance, secure population centers, establish control grids. Any questions?" "Commander," called out Weapons Master Corvex Haye from his station, "should we bother taking prisoners? These beings appear so fragile that stunning weapons might prove fatal." "A valid concern. Use lowest power settings when possible. The Council prefers live specimens for study." Vexthara turned her attention to the tactical display showing Haven's Rest growing larger as they approached. "Though I suspect we'll have more volunteers than we can transport once they witness our capabilities." The human colony appeared on their screens as a modest collection of metal and concrete structures surrounding a central spaceport. Primitive atmospheric craft moved between buildings while ground vehicles traveled along designated pathways. Everything seemed peaceful, orderly, and utterly defenseless. "No orbital defense platforms," observed Navigation Officer Zethryx. "No energy barriers, no hidden weapon emplacements. They haven't even scrambled their aircraft." Vexthara felt a twinge of disappointment. She had hoped these humans would provide at least minimal entertainment before surrendering. The last 3 species they'd encountered had managed to resist for several days before acknowledging the futility of opposing hegemony might. "Open a communication channel to their leadership," she commanded. "Standard surrender demand. Make it clear that compliance will result in minimal casualties." The main view screen flickered as their transmission penetrated Haven's Rest's communication networks. Within moments, a human face appeared, male, middle-aged, with graying hair and worried eyes behind transparent corrective lenses. "This is Governor Marcus Chen of Haven's Rest Colony. We're receiving your signal, but I'm afraid we don't understand your intentions. Are you here for trade negotiations?" Vexthara stepped forward, allowing her full imposing presence to fill the screen. She had perfected this intimidation technique over decades of conquests, knowing that most species surrendered immediately upon witnessing Kethmori physical superiority. "I am Battle Commander Vexthara Morkane of the Third Hegemony Fleet. You and your people now exist under our dominion. Surrender immediately and submit to processing. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your colony." Governor Chen stared at her for several long seconds, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something Vexthara couldn't quite identify. When he spoke again, his voice carried a strange quality, not fear, as she expected, but something resembling pity. "Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a peaceful human settlement. We have no quarrel with your people, whoever you are. Perhaps we can discuss this situation diplomatically. Vexthara clicked her mandibles impatiently. There is nothing to discuss. You have 1 standard hour to gather your population in designated areas for processing. Failure to comply will be interpreted as hostile action. I see. Chen removed his corrective lenses and cleaned them methodically. Commander, may I ask how many worlds your people have conquered using these tactics? The question surprised Vexthara. Most species begged for mercy or demanded to speak with higher authorities. This human seemed genuinely curious about their military history. 37 systems, 115 inhabited worlds. Over 40 different species now serve the hegemony in various capacities. She allowed pride to creep into her voice. We are efficient conquerors, Governor Chen. Your people would be wise to recognize this reality. 37 systems. Chen replaced his glasses and nodded slowly. That's quite impressive, and I assume you've never encountered significant resistance during these conquests? Resistance is irrelevant when facing superior technology and tactics, Vexthara replied. The strong dominate the weak. This is the natural order. The natural order. Chen smiled, and for the first time, Vexthara felt a chill run down her spine. There was something unsettling about that smile. Not the desperate bravado of a cornered animal, but the quiet confidence of someone who knew a secret. Commander, I need to share something with you before we proceed. You see, Haven's Rest isn't just a peaceful colony. It's a frontier settlement, established by people who chose to live on the very edge of human space. Do you know why someone would make that choice? I neither know nor care about your personal motivations, Vexthara snapped. You have 57 minutes remaining. They make that choice because they're running from something, Commander. Or because they're looking for something. Sometimes both. Chen leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers across the vast distance of space. In my case, I came here because I was looking for a quiet place to retire after 30 years of military service. Military service? Sub-Commander Thexel stepped closer to the view screen. These creatures possess an organized military? Oh! Chen continued, his voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow made Vexthara's combat instincts scream warnings. I served in the Terran Colonial Defense Force. 3 decades of putting down pirate raids, suppressing alien incursions, and protecting human settlements from hostile forces. He paused, studying their faces with those strangely intense eyes. You mentioned that you've conquered 40 species across 37 systems. That's quite a record. But I'm curious, how many of those species fought back with everything they had? How many refused to surrender even when facing extinction? Most species recognize the futility of resistance, Vexthara replied, though she found herself genuinely interested in this conversation. Few conquered peoples engaged in philosophical discussions during surrender demands. Yes, that makes sense. Most intelligent species would calculate the odds and make rational decisions based on self-preservation. Chen nodded approvingly. But you see, Commander, humans aren't most species. We have this unfortunate habit of doing irrational things when threatened. The view screen flickered as additional signals flooded their communication arrays. Suddenly, dozens of new windows opened, showing human faces from across the colony, men and women of various ages, all wearing the same unsettling smile as Governor Chen. Allow me to introduce some of my neighbors, Chen said pleasantly. Sarah Martinez, former Special Operations sniper with over 300 confirmed kills. James O'Brien, retired demolitions expert who once brought down an entire pirate stronghold using improvised explosives. Catherine Liu, ex-intelligence operative who spent 15 years infiltrating hostile alien organizations. More faces appeared, each introduction revealing another former military specialist who had chosen Haven's Rest as their retirement destination. You see, Commander, when humans get tired of fighting, they don't just stop. They find quiet places to rest, to garden, to raise families, to pretend that the galaxy is a peaceful place where reasonable people can settle their differences through dialogue. Chen's expression hardened, but when someone threatens that peace, threatens our families, threatens our right to exist as free beings, he leaned back in his chair. Well, that's when you discover why we needed to retire in the first place. Vexthara felt the first stirrings of unease. You have 53 minutes to comply with surrender demands. Commander, I'm going to make you a counteroffer. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than all of Vexthara's threats combined. Take your fleet and leave our system, never return. Spread the word to whatever empire you represent that human space is off limits. And if we refuse? Chen's smile returned. And this time Vexthara recognized what she was seeing. She had witnessed that expression before, reflected in her own mirror after particularly brutal battles. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. If you refuse, Commander, then you're about to learn why humans are the only species in the galaxy that practices something we call total war. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Vexthara stared at the blank screen, her mind processing what she had just witnessed. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever made demands of the hegemony. No defeated enemy had ever spoken with such confidence while facing overwhelming odds. Commander. Thexel's voice carried a note of uncertainty. Sensors are detecting unusual activity across the colony. Energy signatures don't match their previous passive scans. Elaborate. It appears they're activating concealed systems. Underground facilities, hidden weapon emplacements, camouflaged defensive positions. His 4 arms worked frantically at his console. Commander, this isn't a peaceful settlement. It's a fortress. Vexthara studied the new tactical data flooding her screens. The innocent-looking buildings were revealing hidden gun ports. The peaceful gardens contained concealed missile silos. The simple spaceport was extending massive energy cannons from underground bunkers. How did our scouts miss these installations? She demanded. They appear to be constructed using stealth technology we don't recognize, Corvex's High reported from his weapons station. Active camouflage, sensor-dampening materials. Even the energy sources were completely masked until activation. The communication array crackled to life, and Chen's voice filled the bridge once more. Commander, you now have 10 minutes to withdraw your fleet beyond the system's edge. After that, we stop being polite. Vexthara's pride overrode her growing concern. The hegemony had never retreated from an inferior species, and she would not be the first commander to break that tradition. All ships assume attack formation. Target their defensive installations. Prepare for orbital bombardment. Acknowledged, Battle Commander, came the responses from her fleet captains. The massive hegemony vessels moved into position above Haven's Rest, their weapon arrays charging with deadly energy. Vexthara had performed this maneuver countless times before. The sight of their firepower descending from the heavens usually prompted immediate surrender. Instead, her sensors detected movement throughout the human colony. Commander! Zethrix called out urgently. Multiple contacts launching from the surface. Small craft moving at incredible speed. Fighters? Vexthara demanded. Unknown configuration. They're too small for our targeting computers to lock onto effectively, but they're approaching at velocities that should tear apart any known aircraft. Through the view screen, Vexthara watched dozens of sleek vessels rise from Haven's Rest like angry insects disturbed from their nest. They moved with impossible agility, performing maneuvers that would pulp any normal pilot's internal organs. Open fire on the approaching craft, she commanded. The hegemony weapons blazed to life, sending streams of plasma energy toward the human fighters. Vexthara expected to see them vaporized instantly. Instead, the small craft seemed to dance between the energy beams, their movements too erratic and precise for her gunners to track. Worse yet, they were returning fire, not with the primitive kinetic weapons intelligence had reported, but with focused energy beams that cut through hegemony armor like hot blades through flesh. Hull breach on Deck 7. Thexel reported as the flagship shuddered under impact. How are their weapons penetrating our shields? Before Vexthara could respond, Governor Chen's voice filled the bridge one final time. Commander, I tried to warn you. Humans don't just fight wars. We perfect them. The human fighters swarmed around the massive hegemony vessels like predators surrounding wounded prey. Their weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting engine systems, communication arrays, and weapon emplacements. Within minutes, 3 destroyers were drifting powerless through space. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the laughter. Human voices filled the communication channels, pilots calling out to each other in their harsh language, sharing tactical information and celebrating successful strikes. They sounded like they were enjoying themselves. This is Reaper 37, painting the flagship's bridge for missile lock. Acknowledged, Reaper 37. Tombstone Squadron is moving to support. Hey Chen, remember that time we took out the Zolta pirate fleet with half these numbers? Good time, Sarah. Let's show our visitors why retirement was getting boring. Vexthara realized with growing horror that these weren't desperate defenders fighting for their lives. These were experienced warriors who had been waiting for exactly this kind of challenge. The humans had turned their peaceful colony into a trap, and the hegemony fleet had walked straight into it. All ships, Prepare for tactical withdrawal, she commanded. Her pride finally succumbing to tactical necessity. We'll regroup and develop new strategies for dealing with their capabilities. Commander, Corvex's voice carried a note of panic. The humans are deploying some kind of energy field around our formation. Our jump drives aren't responding. Vextara stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Somehow, the primitive human colony was projecting an interdiction field powerful enough to trap an entire hegemony battle fleet. Governor Chen's final transmission crackled through their speakers. Nobody leaves until we're finished with you, Commander. Class is now in session. Today's lesson: why humans don't take prisoners when someone threatens our homes. As human fighters continued their devastating assault on her fleet, Vextara Morkind began to understand that everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about humanity was wrong. And this was only the beginning. 3 hours into what was supposed to be a simple conquest, Vextara watched her fleet dying around her. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were dissecting the hegemony forces with clinical precision, like scientists studying laboratory specimens. Every move the aliens made was anticipated, countered, and punished with ruthless efficiency. Report, Vextara barked as another explosion rocked the flagship. 7 destroyers offline, 3 heavy cruisers severely damaged. Sub-Commander Thexel reported, his forearms trembling as he processed the incoming damage reports. The humans are targeting our ship's weak points with impossible accuracy. How do they know our vessel specifications? Weapons Master Corvex Hay demanded from his station. These are classified hegemony designs. The answer came through their communication channels in the form of human chatter. Targeting Junction Alpha 7 on the heavy cruiser. Remember the technical specifications from the Ketharin salvage operation? Confirmed. Same design philosophy, just bigger engines. Putting 3 missiles into their reactor containment field. Beautiful shot, Tombstone leader. That's how you cook calamari. Vextara felt her mandibles clatter in shock. The humans possessed detailed knowledge of Kethmori military technology. But how? The hegemony had never encountered this species before. Commander, Navigation Officer Zethrix called out urgently. I'm detecting massive movement beneath the colony surface. Something large is rising from underground installations. The view screen shifted to show Haven's Rest from orbital perspective. The peaceful settlement was transforming before their eyes as enormous structures emerged from concealed underground bunkers. Massive gun batteries, missile silos, and energy projectors rose like the bones of some vast predator awakening from slumber. But those weren't the most disturbing developments. The most disturbing development was the voice that suddenly filled every communication channel across the hegemony fleet. Not Governor Chen this time, but a woman with a crisp professional tone that somehow conveyed more menace than any shouted threat.
Hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen.
Terran Colonial Defense Force, I am assuming tactical command of this engagement. Admiral Sarah Chen. Governor Marcus Chen had mentioned a Sarah Martinez, former Special Operations Sniper. Vextara realized with growing dread that these humans used family names to indicate relationships. The colony's peaceful governor was married to a human military commander. You have made several critical errors in your approach to this system, Admiral Chen continued, her voice maintaining the same terrifyingly calm tone. First, you assumed that a frontier colony would be defenseless. Second, you believed that humans would surrender when faced with superior numbers. Third, and most importantly, you failed to understand what you were actually attacking. The human fighters continued their surgical dismantlement of hegemony vessels, but now larger craft were emerging from the colony's hidden bays. These weren't the nimble interceptors that had initially engaged them, but massive combat ships bristling with weapons that made their own heavy cruisers look primitive. Haven's Rest isn't just a retirement community, Commander Morkane, Admiral Chen explained, somehow knowing Vextara's exact rank and name. It's a training facility. Every human you've encountered today is a former military specialist who chose to spend their golden years teaching the next generation how to fight. On the view screen, Vextara could see additional structures rising from the colony's surface. Not just weapons, but facilities she now recognized as military academies, training grounds, and research installations. The students you've been fighting? Admiral Chen's voice carried what humans might call amusement. They're teenagers. Children, by our standards. We use engagements like this as final examinations. The implications hit Vextara like a plasma bolt to the thorax. The devastating assault that was crippling her elite fleet was being conducted by human children as a training exercise. Impossible, she whispered. Oh, gets worse, Admiral Chen replied. apparently monitoring their private communications. Would you like to know why we have such detailed intelligence about your ship designs, your tactics, and your technology? Vexthara found herself nodding despite herself. Because you're not the first hegemony fleet to attack human space. 3 years ago, a hegemony expeditionary force attempted to raid a mining station in the Kepler system. They killed 47 human civilians, including children, before our forces could respond. The Admiral's voice took on a harder edge. We studied every piece of wreckage from that attack. We analyzed your technology, reverse-engineered your weapons, and war-gamed countermeasures for every tactical doctrine in your military database. The families of those 47 civilians demanded justice, Commander. Today, they're getting it. A new wave of human fighters launched from Haven's Rest, but these craft were different. Larger, more heavily armed, and moving with the kind of tactical precision that spoke of years of experience rather than training exercises. Those are the adult instructors, Admiral Chen explained helpfully. The veterans who taught our students everything they know about space combat. They've been looking forward to testing their lesson plans against real hegemony forces. Vexthara watched in fascinated horror as her remaining ships were systematically disabled. The humans weren't destroying them outright. They were carefully neutralizing weapons, engines, and communications while leaving life support intact. It was the kind of precision that required not just superior technology, but an intimate understanding of their enemy's systems. Why aren't they killing us? She found herself asking aloud. Because dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes, Admiral Chen replied. We want you to survive this encounter, Commander. We want you to return to your hegemony and share what you've experienced here. We want every species in your empire to understand exactly what happens when humans are threatened. A massive human dreadnought emerged from the colony's primary underground facility, dwarfing even the hegemony heavy cruisers. Its hull bristled with weapon systems that belonged in nightmares rather than reality. Meet the TCDF Retribution, Admiral Chen announced, named for our response to unprovoked attacks on human civilians. She's been waiting in Haven's Rest for 3 years, hoping someone would be foolish enough to give us a demonstration opportunity. The dreadnought's weapons powered up, energy signatures that made Vexthara's flagship readings look like children's toys. Now, Commander Morcane, you have a choice. You can continue this engagement and discover what total human warfare actually looks like, or you can accept our terms for conditional surrender. Conditional surrender? Vexthara's translator struggled with the concept. The hegemony had never encountered an enemy that offered terms to defeated foes. You and your surviving crews will be processed as prisoners of war under human military conventions. Your ships will be impounded for study. Your personal effects will be returned, and you will be provided with adequate food, shelter, and medical care while awaiting repatriation. Admiral Chen paused. In exchange, you will submit to debriefing sessions where you will provide complete information about hegemony, military capabilities, territorial claims, and future expansion plans. You will also carry a message back to your leadership when you're eventually released. What message? That human space is now a restricted zone. Any hegemony vessels entering our territory will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Any attacks on human civilians will result in immediate and overwhelming retaliation against hegemony civilian targets. Vexthara felt something she had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service. Genuine fear. Not the tactical concern of facing superior weapons, but the existential dread of encountering a species that approached warfare from a completely alien perspective. You would target civilians? She managed. Commander, your forces just attempted to enslave an entire human colony, including children and elderly retirees. Admiral Chen's voice turned cold. You opened fire on civilian structures without attempting to minimize casualties. By your own actions, you have demonstrated that your species considers non-combatants to be legitimate military targets. The human dreadnought moved closer, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. We're simply adopting your tactical philosophy. If you want to change the rules of engagement, stop attacking our people. Around the fleet, human voices continued their casual commentary. Final exam scores are looking good. Most of our students manage textbook targeting solutions. Tombstone Squadron gets bonus points for that synchronized assault on the heavy cruiser formation. Remember, people, this is why we practice emergency response drills. Real combat is always messier than simulations. Vexthara realized she was listening to teachers grading their students' performance in real time, while those same students systematically destroyed her fleet. Admiral Chen, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Commander? We accept your terms. Excellent. Please transmit your surrender to all remaining vessels and prepare for boarding. Our Marines will be conducting inspections to ensure compliance with prisoner of war protocols. The hegemony communication channels filled with surrender transmissions as her surviving ship captains acknowledged defeat. Vexthara watched through the view screen as human vessels moved to dock with her fleet, their boarding parties preparing to take control of ships that had conquered entire star systems. Commander, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of what might have been sympathy. I want you to understand something important. What you've experienced today isn't humanity at war. This was a training exercise that got out of hand. Vexthara's compound eyes tracked human Marines boarding her flagship through the airlock. They moved with professional efficiency, weapons ready but not threatening, following protocols that suggested extensive experience with prisoner management. If you want to see humans at war, Admiral Chen continued, ask your intelligence services about the Zolta Pirate Confederacy. Ask them what happened to the Rigel system after pirates attacked a human hospital ship. Ask them why an entire sector of space is now marked as a dead zone on galactic navigation charts. The human Marines reached the bridge, their leader removing his helmet, to reveal a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes. He looked remarkably like Governor Chen, though larger and more heavily muscled. Ma'am, I'm Colonel David Chen, TCDF Marine Corps. You are now prisoners of war under human military authority. Please indicate if any of your personnel require medical attention. Another Chen. How many humans in this extended family held military rank? Colonel Chen, Vexthara managed. Are you related to Governor Chen and Admiral Chen? The colonel smiled, and once again Vexthara found herself disturbed by the expression. Yes, ma'am. Marcus is my older brother. Sarah is my wife. This is what humans call a family business. He gestured for her to move away from her command station. If you'll accompany me, Commander, Admiral Chen would like to conduct your initial debriefing. I think you'll find our prisoner facilities quite comfortable. We've hosted other hegemony officers before, so we understand your species' basic requirements. As Vexthara was escorted off her own bridge by human soldiers, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had walked into something far larger and more dangerous than a simple territorial dispute. The humans weren't just defending their space, they were conducting some kind of long-term campaign against the hegemony, using battles like this to gather intelligence and test military capabilities. Worst yet, they seemed to be enjoying it. Colonel Chen, she said, as they walked toward the airlock, how long have your people been preparing for war with the hegemony? The colonel paused, considering his answer. Commander, humans have been preparing for war since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. We just finally found someone worth fighting. As they boarded the human transport vessel, Vexthara caught a glimpse through the viewports of Haven's Rest below. The colony was still transforming, revealing layer after layer of concealed military installations. What she had thought was a simple settlement was actually a fortress that put hegemony military bases to shame. One more question, Colonel. How many other retirement communities do humans operate along your frontier? Colonel Chen's smile returned. That, Commander, is classified information. But I will say this. Every human colony has veterans. Every human settlement has people who've seen combat. And every human world knows that sometimes peaceful people have to do violent things to protect what they love. The transport sealed its airlock and began moving toward the massive human dreadnought waiting in space. Welcome to human space, Commander Morcane. Your education is just beginning. The human detention facility aboard the TCDF Retribution was nothing like what Vexthara expected. Instead of cramped cells and minimal life support, she found herself assigned to quarters that were larger and more comfortable than her own cabin aboard the Hegemony flagship. The walls displayed holographic images of alien landscapes. The environmental systems were perfectly calibrated for Kethmori physiology, and the food dispenser provided meals that actually tasted like home. This is psychological warfare, she muttered to Sub-Commander Thexal during their daily exercise period in the ship's recreation facility. They're trying to make us forget we're prisoners. Thexal paused in his stretching routine, all four arms extending in the complex pattern that kept Kethmori muscles properly conditioned. Perhaps, Commander, but I've been observing their behavior patterns. I don't believe this treatment is intended as manipulation. Explain. They actually seem to care whether we're comfortable. The human guards ask about our health, adjust environmental settings without being requested, and respond to complaints with genuine concern. Thexiol lowered his voice. Yesterday, when Kovexai mentioned missing the taste of fermented kelp paste, they spent 3 hours researching Kethmori dietary preferences and produced a synthetic version. Vexthara considered this information. In 3 centuries of military service, She had never encountered an enemy that treated prisoners better than the hegemony treated its own civilians. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Wakwa, Elizabeth Martinez, the human medical officer assigned to monitor their health. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Utterly unremarkable except for the way she could diagnose Kethmori medical conditions better than most military doctors. "Good morning, Commander. How are you feeling today?" Dr. Martinez spoke fluent Kethmori, though her accent suggested she had learned the language recently. "Well enough," Vexthar replied cautiously. "Though, I'm curious about something, Doctor. How did humans acquire such detailed knowledge of our physiology?" Dr. Martinez smiled sadly. 3 years ago, after the attack on Kepler Station, we recovered several hegemony casualties from the battle wreckage. We tried everything to save them, Commander. Everything. We studied Kethmori biology, chemistry, even psychological profiles, in hopes of providing proper medical care. She paused, her expression growing distant. "We kept 2 of your soldiers alive for 6 months while trying to heal injuries that would have been fatal to humans. They eventually died anyway, but we learnt enough to develop proper treatment protocols for your species." Vexthara felt her mandibles clatter in confusion. "You attempted to save enemy casualties?" "Of course. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't discriminate based on species." Dr. Martinez checked her tablet, reviewing their medical data. "We've made significant improvements since then. If you or your crew suffer any health problems during your stay, we should be able to provide appropriate care." After the doctor left, Vexthara found herself alone with thoughts that challenged everything she believed about warfare and enemy behavior. The humans weren't just treating them humanely, they were actively working to understand and care for a species they had every reason to hate. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of her daily interrogator, a human who had introduced himself as Major Thomas Park, Intelligence Division. Unlike the medical staff, Major Park possessed the cold, analytical mindset that Vexthara recognized from her own intelligence officers. "Good morning, Commander. I hope you're finding your accommodations satisfactory." "They're adequate," she replied, maintaining military bearing despite her circumstances. "Excellent. Today I'd like to discuss hegemony expansion patterns along the galactic rim. Specifically, your targeting criteria for selecting worlds suitable for conquest." Vexthara had been dreading this topic. Military intelligence was classified at the highest levels, protected by neural implants that would kill her if she attempted to reveal critical information. "Major Park, you understand that I cannot provide strategic intelligence about hegemony operations. Of course, I'm not asking for classified data." Park activated a holographic display showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. "I'm curious about your personal observations during conquest operations. For instance, what factors make a world attractive for hegemony settlement?"
The question seemed innocent enough.
Vexthara found herself considering the tactical advantages they typically sought: mineral resources, strategic positioning, defensible geography. "We prefer worlds with abundant natural resources and minimal native population," she said carefully. "Conquest is more efficient when resistance is limited. That makes sense from a military perspective." Park highlighted several star systems on the map. "These are the worlds you've attacked over the past 5 years. Can you identify any common characteristics?" As Vexthara studied the tactical display, patterns began to emerge. The targeted systems formed a rough line along what humans apparently called the neutral zone. But there were gaps, systems that met hegemony criteria but had been left untouched. "Why didn't you attack these worlds?" Park indicated the gaps in the pattern. Vexthara paused, realizing she didn't know the answer. "Those decisions were made at command level. I was simply assigned targets for conquest." "Interesting, because from our perspective, those untouched systems have something in common." Park activated additional data overlays, showing trade routes, communication networks, and energy signatures. They're all under human protection treaties. The implications hit her like a plasma burst. "You're saying the hegemony has been deliberately avoiding human-protected space?" "For 3 years, yes. Ever since the Kepler incident, your leadership has been very careful to only attack unprotected worlds." Park leaned back in his chair, which suggests they understand something about human capabilities that they haven't shared with field commanders. Vexthara stared at the tactical display, processing the revelation. The hegemony high command knew about human military strength. They had been sending frontier fleets against safe targets while avoiding direct confrontation with human forces. "Major Park, are you suggesting that my fleet was sacrificed as a test of human capabilities?" What do you think, Commander? The question hung in the air between them, like an unexploded ordnance. Vexthara had served the hegemony for 3 centuries, believing in their cause, following orders without question. The possibility that High Command had deliberately sent her forces into a trap for intelligence-gathering purposes challenged everything she thought she knew about her own government. I need time to process this information, she said finally. Of course. We'll continue tomorrow. After Major Park left, Vexthara spent hours staring at her quarter's holographic displays, no longer seeing alien landscapes but tactical implications. If the humans were correct, the hegemony had been fighting a shadow war for 3 years, probing human defenses while keeping their main fleets safely away from actual combat. Her brooding was interrupted by unexpected visitors. 3 of her junior officers, all looking distinctly uncomfortable. Commander, said Lieutenant Kexdar, we need to discuss something about the humans. What about them? They've been teaching us things. About their society, their history, their approach to warfare. Kexdar's mandibles clicked nervously. Commander, I think we may have misunderstood what we were fighting. Vexthara gestured for them to sit. Explain. The humans don't conquer worlds for resources or territory, Lieutenant Vexthal interjected. They settle planets because they want to live there.
They build homes, raise families, create communities.
Yes, we observed this at Haven's Rest. But, Commander, that's not just one colony.
That's their entire civilization. Lieutenant Morhex leaned forward urgently. They showed us records of human expansion. Hundreds of worlds, all settled by voluntary colonists. No slave populations, no conquered species, no military governors. Vexthara considered this information. That seems inefficient from a resource management perspective. That's what we thought too, Kexdar replied. But their economic models are completely different from ours. Instead of extracting resources from conquered territories, they trade with allied species on equal terms. Instead of forced labor, they use automated systems and voluntary cooperation. And it works, Vextal added. Their industrial output exceeds hegemony production across every metric. Their technology advances faster than ours. Their military, as we've discovered, is more effective than our own. Vexthara felt something shift in her understanding of galactic politics. The hegemony model of conquest and domination wasn't just morally questionable. It was demonstrably inferior to the human approach. There's more, Commander, Morhex said quietly. They've been showing us historical records of human conflicts. They don't just fight defensive wars. What do you mean? When humans encounter genuine threats, species that attack civilian populations, practice slavery, commit what they call crimes against sentience, they don't just defend themselves. Morhex's voice dropped to a whisper. They launch crusades. The word didn't translate properly, but the context was clear enough. Humans apparently conducted ideological warfare against enemies they deemed fundamentally evil. Show me these records, Vexthara commanded. Her officers led her to one of the ship's common areas, where human personnel had set up what they called a cultural exchange center. Historical displays showed human military campaigns against various alien threats throughout their expansion into space. What she saw challenged every assumption she had made about human nature. The humans didn't just defeat enemies, they systematically dismantled entire civilizations that practiced slavery, genocide, or aggressive expansion. The Zolta Pirate Confederacy had been completely eradicated, their worlds turned into memorial parks for their victims. The Rigel hegemony had been conquered, its leadership tried for war crimes, and its former territories reorganized as independent democracies. This is what they mean by total war, Kexdar explained. Humans don't just win battles. They restructure entire regions of space to prevent the same problems from recurring. Vexthara studied the timeline of human military actions. In every case, they had started as defensive responses to attacks on human civilians or allied species, but once committed to warfare, humans apparently didn't stop until they had completely eliminated the threat. Commander, a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Admiral Sarah Chen approaching, accompanied by several human officers. Admiral, I trust you don't mind our review of your historical records? Not at all. Understanding human military philosophy is important for your eventual return to hegemony space. Admiral Chen gestured toward the displays. What conclusions have you drawn? Vexthara considered her words carefully. Your species approaches warfare differently than ours, more comprehensively. That's one way to put it. Admiral Chen activated additional historical displays. Commander, may I ask what you believe will happen when you return to hegemony space with your report? I will inform High Command about human capabilities and recommend that they reconsider expansion into your territory.
And if they ignore your recommendations?
If they decide that human space represents too valuable a prize to abandon, Vexthara had been dreading this question since her capture. Then they will likely mount a full-scale invasion with the entire hegemony battle fleet. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. 47,000 ships, 2 billion soldiers. The largest military force in known galactic history. The fact that the humans knew exact hegemony military numbers sent another chill through Vexthara's consciousness. Yes, Admiral. Commander, I want you to understand something important before you return home. Humans have been preparing for exactly that scenario since the Kepler attack 3 years ago. New displays activated, showing star charts marked with defensive positions, supply networks, and fleet deployments. The scope of human military preparation was staggering. We've been building ships, training personnel, and forming alliances with every species that has suffered under hegemony expansion. When your full fleet arrives, they won't be facing just human forces. Admiral Chen smiled with that unsettling human expression of anticipation. They'll be facing a coalition of 43 species, all of whom have very personal reasons for wanting to see the hegemony permanently dismantled. As the full implications of this revelation settled into her mind, Vexthara realized that her capture was never intended to gather intelligence about the hegemony. It was intended to send a message back to Hegemony High Command, a declaration of war. The prisoner exchange occurred 6 months after Vexthara's capture, at a neutral station in the buffer zone between human and hegemony space. As she walked across the airlock threshold from human custody back to her own people, Vexthara felt like she was stepping from light into darkness. The hegemony transport ship was exactly as she remembered. Cramped corridors, minimal environmental controls, and the ever-present scent of recycled air and industrial lubricants. After months aboard human vessels, it felt primitive and oppressive. Battle Commander Mor Kain greeted High Strategist Vekthul Nahes, his massive frame filling the narrow corridor. The High Command is eager to hear your report. As am I eager to deliver it, Vexthara replied, though she dreaded the coming conversations. During the journey back to hegemony space, she spent hours preparing her briefing materials, trying to find ways to convey the truth about human capabilities without triggering the neural implants that prevented disclosure of classified information. The humans had been clever in their interrogation techniques, never asking directly for military secrets, but instead guiding her to discover uncomfortable truths about her own government. The capital world of Kethmora Prime appeared on their view screen like a diseased jewel, its surface covered with the industrial sprawl that supported the hegemony's war machine. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the planet, bristling with defensive weapons that suddenly seemed inadequate after witnessing human technology. High Command met in the War Chamber, a vast circular room where holographic displays showed the current status of all hegemony military operations. 13 high strategists occupied positions around the central podium, their compound eyes reflecting the tactical data streams that flowed across the room's surfaces. Battle Commander Mor Kain, Supreme Strategist Korthval Tet Haynes' voice carried the authority of absolute power within hegemony military hierarchy. Your report on the human encounter. Vexthara activated the holographic projector and began her presentation, carefully organizing the information to emphasize tactical realities over political implications. The humans possess significantly advanced military capabilities. Their ships utilize stealth technology we cannot detect, energy weapons that penetrate our shielding, and tactical coordination that exceeds our best estimates. Numbers, Commander, demanded High Strategist Velmar Kex Throne. How many ships did they deploy against your fleet? Approximately 200 craft, ranging from single-pilot fighters to heavy cruisers. However, Supreme Strategist, I must emphasize that vessel count is less relevant than their technological superiority. 200 ships defeated your entire battle group? Supreme Strategist Korthval's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Impossible. Vexthara activated tactical recordings from the battle, showing human fighters destroying hegemony vessels with surgical precision. The war chamber fell silent as the assembled leadership watched their most advanced military technology being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be primitive alien craft. This footage has been verified? High Strategist Morthik Valhes inquired. Multiple sensor records confirmed the data, Supreme Strategist. The humans also provided additional tactical recordings from their perspective, showing details of their attack patterns. They gave you their combat recordings? Several high strategists exchanged glances. For what purpose? This was the moment Vexthara had been dreading. They wanted to ensure that High Command understood exactly what human forces are capable of achieving. She activated the next series of displays, showing human star charts with defensive positions and fleet deployments. The humans have been preparing for large-scale conflict with the hegemony for 3 years. They possess detailed intelligence about our military capabilities, territorial claims, and expansion plans. How detailed? Supreme Strategist Korthval demanded. They knew the exact number of ships in our battle fleet. They had technical specifications for our vessel classes. They could predict our tactical responses with perfect accuracy. Vexthara paused. Supreme Strategist. They knew more about hegemony military strength than I did. The war chamber erupted in angry chittering as the high strategists processed this information. If the humans possessed comprehensive intelligence about hegemony forces, it suggested either massive security breaches or surveillance capabilities that exceeded their own. Silence! Supreme Strategist Korthval's command restored order. Commander Morkane, what are your strategic recommendations? Vexthara had prepared for this question, knowing that her answer would determine whether billions of lives were saved or lost in the coming conflict. Supreme Strategist, I recommend immediate cessation of all expansion activities in human space and formal recognition of human territorial claims. The silence that followed was more ominous than the previous chittering. You recommend surrender? High Strategist Vekmar stated flatly. I recommend tactical realism based on observed capabilities, Vexthara replied. The humans are not a primitive species that can be easily conquered. They are a military power that exceeds our own technological development. One battle group does not constitute comprehensive intelligence about enemy capabilities. High Strategist Morthek interjected. Perhaps this human colony was unusually well defended. With respect, Supreme Strategist, the humans indicated that Haven's Rest was a training facility for their student soldiers. The forces that defeated my fleet were children conducting military exercises. Children? Supreme Strategist Korthval's voice carried dangerous undertones. You were defeated by alien children? Vexthara realized she had made a tactical error. The high strategists were interpreting her report as evidence of personal failure rather than enemy capability. Supreme Strategist, may I respectfully request that High Command review the complete tactical recordings before making strategic decisions based on my summary. The recordings will be analyzed, Korthval replied coldly. However, your personal recommendations suggest that extended captivity may have affected your judgment. You are hereby relieved of active command pending psychological evaluation. As security personnel moved to escort her from the war chamber, Vexthara made one final attempt to convey the truth. Supreme Strategist, the humans are forming a coalition with 43 species that have been victims of hegemony expansion. If we attack their space, we will be facing a galactic alliance specifically designed to destroy our civilization. Commander, Supreme Strategist Korthval's voice carried finality. You are dismissed. 3 months later, Vexthara sat in her assigned quarters on Kethmora Prime, reviewing intelligence reports that filtered through the military networks. Her warnings had been ignored. Worse, they had been interpreted as evidence of human psychological manipulation during her captivity. High Command had reached the opposite conclusion from her recommendations. If a single human colony could defeat an entire hegemony battle group, then human space represented the most valuable prize in the galaxy. The species that controlled such advanced technology would become the dominant power in their region of space. The hegemony could not allow that to happen. Intelligence Division had spent 3 months analyzing the tactical recordings from Haven's Rest, but instead of recognizing human superiority, they had focused on identifying exploitable weaknesses. Their reports concluded that human forces relied heavily on advanced technology rather than superior tactics, suggesting that numerical superiority could overcome their advantages. The humans have perhaps 1,000 combat-capable vessels. Intelligence Coordinator Velthara Keshain explained during the briefing that Vexthara attended as part of her psychological evaluation. Our battle fleet consists of 47,000 ships. Simple mathematics indicates that we can achieve victory through overwhelming force. Vexthara wanted to explain that the humans had been building ships and training personnel for 3 years specifically to face such an assault, but her protests had been dismissed as evidence of continued psychological contamination. The final strategic decision came down 6 months after her return. Operation Galactic Unity would deploy the entire hegemony battle fleet in a coordinated assault on human space, with the goal of capturing their advanced technology and incorporating their worlds into the Empire. Battle Commander Morkane. Supreme Strategist Korthval informed her during their final meeting. You are being reassigned to logistics coordination for the upcoming campaign. Your experience with human capabilities will be valuable for supply planning. Supreme Strategist, I respectfully request permission to share my complete observations about human military philosophy. Your observations have been thoroughly reviewed and incorporated into our planning process. Vexthara realized that no amount of evidence would convince High Command to reconsider their decision. They had committed to a course of action based on pride and assumption rather than tactical reality. When do we launch the assault? She asked. 18 months from now. The entire battle fleet will converge on human space simultaneously, striking every defended system before they can coordinate their response. As Vectara left the meeting, she carried with her the terrible knowledge that the hegemony was about to commit species suicide through sheer arrogance. They had learned nothing from the defeat at Haven's Rest except that humans possessed technology worth stealing. But she had learned something during her captivity that High Command refused to acknowledge. Humans didn't just fight defensive wars. When threatened with extinction, they transformed their entire civilization into a weapon designed to eliminate the threat permanently. The hegemony was about to discover what human total war actually meant, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. During the following months, Vextara watched the greatest military build-up in hegemony history unfold around her. Ship construction facilities worked around the clock, producing new vessels at unprecedented rates. Military academies graduated officer candidates early to meet personnel demands. Entire star systems were converted to weapons production. The scale of preparation was staggering, involving resources that represented the combined wealth of hundreds of conquered worlds. The hegemony was committing everything they had to the destruction of human civilization. But as she reviewed supply manifests and troop movements, Vexthara noticed disturbing patterns in the intelligence reports filtering back from human space. Human colonies were evacuating non-essential personnel. Human industrial facilities were shifting to wartime production. Human allies were mobilizing their own military forces. Most ominously, human diplomatic missions were visiting species throughout the galaxy, offering military support to anyone willing to rise against hegemony occupation. The humans weren't just preparing to defend their own space. They were organizing a galactic rebellion designed to destroy the hegemony from within, while their military forces attacked from without. Vexthara tried once more to warn High Command about the scope of human preparations, but her reports were dismissed as continued evidence of psychological manipulation. The humans are attempting to intimidate us through propaganda, Intelligence Coordinator Kes Hain explained dismissively. Their actual capabilities remain limited to perhaps 2,000 combat vessels and a handful of allied species. As the launch date for Operation Galactic Unity approached, Vexthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable before her encounter with human warfare. She began secretly documenting everything she observed about hegemony military preparations, creating a comprehensive record of their forces, tactics, and strategic objectives. When the humans inevitably won the coming war, someone would need to explain to the surviving Kethmori civilians why their government had chosen extinction over coexistence, and she would make sure that future generations understood the true cost of underestimating a species that treated warfare as applied genocide. The end of the hegemony began at precisely 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time, when 47,000 hegemony warships emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates of 17 human worlds simultaneously. Vexthara watched the opening moments of Operation Galactic Unity from the command center of the logistics vessel Inevitable Victory, surrounded by real-time tactical displays showing the largest military operation in galactic history unfolding across multiple star systems. For the first 30 minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. Hegemony fleets appeared in perfect formation around their target worlds, overwhelming local defenses through sheer numerical superiority. Human colonies that had withstood previous probing attacks found themselves facing invasion forces that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. Human defensive positions are falling back across all fronts, reported communications officer Zelpara from her station. Enemy forces appear to be conducting fighting withdrawals rather than attempting to hold their positions. Supreme Strategist Korthval, commanding the operation from his flagship, seemed pleased with the initial results. His voice carried satisfaction as he addressed the fleet commanders. The humans are retreating as predicted. Their technology cannot compensate for our overwhelming numerical advantage. But Vexthara noticed something in the tactical patterns that made her mandibles clatter with anxiety. The human withdrawals were too organized, too coordinated. Instead of the desperate defensive actions she expected from a species facing extinction, The humans were executing textbook strategic retreats, falling back to predetermined positions while inflicting maximum casualties on advancing hegemony forces. "Communications officer, are we receiving any surrender transmissions from human leadership?" she asked. "None, battle commander. In fact, they appear to be broadcasting messages to the civilian population, encouraging continued resistance." Vexthar studied the intercepted transmissions, watching human leaders address their people with the same calm confidence she remembered from Governor Chen at Haven's Rest. They weren't acting like a species facing inevitable defeat. They were acting like a species executing a carefully planned strategy. The first indication that something was wrong came 90 minutes into the assault. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected at the edge of all target systems, reported the sensor operator aboard Supreme Strategist Korthval's flagship. Unknown configuration vessels emerging in large numbers. Vexthara switched her displays to show the new arrivals and felt her heart skip beats. Hundreds of ships were appearing around each battle zone, but they weren't human designs. She recognized Altairian cruisers, Centauri destroyers, Arcturian battleships, and dozens of other configurations representing species that had suffered under hegemony expansion. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen addressing all hegemony forces." A familiar voice filled the communication channels. "You are now surrounded by the Combined Liberation Fleet, representing 43 species united in their determination to end hegemony tyranny permanently." Admiral Chen's image appeared on screens throughout the hegemony fleet, but she was no longer wearing the simple uniform Vexthara remembered. Now she displayed the insignia of Supreme Allied Commander, representing a military coalition that spanned half the galaxy. "You have been drawn into a carefully prepared trap designed to gather your entire military force in a single engagement where it can be eliminated once and for all." Vexthara watched in horror as the tactical displays updated to show the true scope of human preparations. The retreating human forces had fallen back to positions where they could coordinate with the arriving Allied fleets, creating perfect crossfire zones that left the hegemony forces exposed from multiple directions. Hegemony commanders, you now have one opportunity to prevent the complete annihilation of your species. Order all ships to power down weapons and prepare for unconditional surrender. Supreme Strategist Korthval's response was predictably defiant. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering in a legitimate hegemony military operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Chen's smile was visible even across the vast distances of space, transmitted through quantum communication arrays that made real-time coordination possible across multiple star systems. "Very well. All Allied forces, you are authorized to commence Operation Liberation. Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people." What followed was not a battle. It was a systematic dismantlement of the most powerful military force in galactic history. The human-led coalition had spent 3 years studying hegemony tactics, technology, and command structures. They knew exactly how Kethmori commanders would respond to specific threats, how their ships would maneuver under pressure, and where their formations were most vulnerable. Worse yet, they had weapons specifically designed to counter hegemony technology. "Our shields are not stopping their energy weapons," reported the flagship's tactical officer. "Their projectiles are penetrating our armor as if it weren't there." Vexthara realized that the humans had not only reverse-engineered hegemony technology, they had improved upon it, creating countermeasures that made their own defenses obsolete. "All ships, scatter formation and prepare for individual combat," Supreme Strategist Korthval ordered, abandoning the coordinated tactics that had won them control of 37 star systems. But the humans had anticipated this response as well. "Attention hegemony vessels." Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communication channels. "We have a message for your crews." Suddenly, every hegemony ship found its communication systems flooded with transmissions from the species they had conquered over the past 3 centuries. Altairians described the orbital bombardment of their homeworld. Centauri families shared recordings of their relatives being shipped to slave labor camps. Arcturian children sang songs about parents who had died defending their cities from hegemony assault forces. The psychological impact was devastating. Many hegemony crews had never been told the details of their empire's expansion methods, believing they were spreading civilization to primitive worlds rather than conducting genocide against peaceful species. "You want to know why we fight so hard?" Admiral Chen's voice cut through the testimonials. "Because we've seen what happens when the hegemony conquers a world. We've met the survivors, we've buried the victims, and we've sworn that it will never happen again." The battle continued for 18 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human coalition had superior technology, better coordination, detailed intelligence about their enemy, and most importantly, the absolute moral certainty that comes from fighting against genuine evil. One by one, hegemony battle groups were surrounded and destroyed or forced to surrender. Those ships that attempted to flee found their hyperspace routes blocked by additional allied forces that had been positioned at every possible escape vector. The humans had planned for every contingency. Supreme Strategist Korthval made his final transmission from the bridge of his burning flagship. All remaining hegemony vessels, this is your Supreme Commander. You are hereby ordered to surrender and submit to enemy authority. The hegemony fleet no longer exists as a fighting force. Vexthara felt something break inside her consciousness as she watched the tactical displays update with final casualty reports. 9,000 hegemony ships destroyed. 8,000 ships captured with their crews taken prisoner. Every single invasion force had been eliminated or neutralized. The greatest military operation in galactic history had resulted in the complete destruction of the force that launched it. But the humans weren't finished. This is Admiral Chen addressing all hegemony worlds and occupied territories. The transmission reached every corner of the former empire. The hegemony military force has been defeated. Your government no longer possesses the capability to maintain control over conquered populations. Effective immediately, all enslaved species are declared free. All hegemony administrators and military personnel in occupied territories are ordered to surrender to local resistance forces. Any attempts to harm civilian populations during this transition will result in immediate retaliation. The liberation of the hegemony's empire began within hours. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries ago rose against their oppressors, supported by human military advisors and equipment. The infrastructure of tyranny that had taken 3 centuries to build collapsed in a matter of weeks. Vexthara spent the following months in human custody once again, this time as part of the largest prisoner exchange in galactic history. But her captivity was different now. She was no longer an enemy commander but a war criminal awaiting trial for crimes against sentience. The humans had established what they called the Galactic Justice Tribunal, where representatives from every species affected by hegemony expansion would determine the fate of those responsible for 3 centuries of conquest and slavery. Commander Morkine, said the human prosecutor assigned to her case, a young woman named Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh. We've reviewed your military record. 17 successful planetary conquests, including the subjugation of 3 intelligent species. Vexthara nodded, unable to deny the evidence of her own actions. However, we've also reviewed your attempts to warn Hegemony High Command about human capabilities, as well as your efforts to document war crimes committed by your own government. Lieutenant Walsh activated a holographic display showing Vexthara's secret records of Hegemony military preparations and strategic decisions. Your documentation provided crucial evidence for our understanding of how the hegemony operated. More importantly, it demonstrates that you eventually recognized the moral problems with your civilization's behavior. What does this mean for my case?
The tribunal has reached a decision.
You are guilty of war crimes committed during your military service. However, your cooperation with the investigation and your attempts to prevent the final war have been considered as mitigating factors. Lieutenant Walsh handed her a data tablet containing the tribunal's judgment. You are sentenced to 20 years of community service, working with the Galactic Reconstruction Authority to help rebuild the worlds damaged during hegemony occupation. After completion of your service, you will be free to live wherever you choose, though you are permanently banned from holding military rank. Vexthara stared at the sentence in disbelief. After participating in the conquest of 17 worlds, she had expected execution or life imprisonment. Why show mercy to someone like me? Lieutenant Walsh smiled with the same expression Vexthara had come to associate with human complexity. Because 20 years from now, when former hegemony worlds are thriving as free societies, we want you to remember that humans could have chosen revenge, but instead chose justice. We want you to understand the difference between conquest and liberation. And because, she continued, we're hoping that species like yours will learn from this experience and choose to become part of the galactic community rather than trying to dominate it. As Vexthara began her service with the Reconstruction Authority, helping to repair the damage her own civilization had caused, she came to understand the final lesson that humans had been trying to teach the galaxy. Strength without wisdom led to destruction. Power without compassion created enemies. Victory without mercy simply ensured that the cycle of violence would continue. The humans had broken that cycle by demonstrating that it was possible to be simultaneously the most dangerous species in the galaxy and the most merciful. 20 years later, as she completed her sentence and prepared to begin a new life as a free citizen of the Galactic Federation. Vexthara received a message from Admiral Chen, now retired, but still overseeing the integration of former hegemony species into galactic society.
Commander, I hope you've learned from your experiences what we tried to show you from the beginning, that real strength comes not from the ability to destroy your enemies, but from the wisdom to turn enemies into friends. The humans didn't just defeat the hegemony,
we liberated it from itself. Standing on the rebuilt surface of Altair Prime, surrounded by the gardens that had replaced the slave labor camps she had once helped establish, Vexthara finally understood what Admiral Chen had meant.
the humans hadn't just won a war.
They had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization, proving that cooperation could triumph over conquest, that justice could prevail over tyranny, and that even the most bitter enemies could learn to live in peace. It was, she realized, the most human victory of all.